Are Dana White and the UFC capitulating to potentially foreign terrorist groups and interests? Is Rachel Reeves on the right lines when she talks about taxing kitchen knives to fight knife crime? And is the EU up to something when they talk about passing a chat control bill behind closed doors? Of course they are. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood, far-right thug, always satirical, unless he's not, of course, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. It is currently Friday, the 28th of November, 2025, and provided all goes okay, we should be good for tomorrow evening. Yet to confirm a time as of yet. Because I've got some stuff earlier on in the day which I need to sort first, so I'll let you guys know as soon as possible, where we can recap the recent conversation on Liam Tuff's podcast with Steve Laws. So there's really good things to go over with regards to that. I figured we'd make it a little bit of a watch party as well, provided the video obviously has been taken down. It's still up as far as I'm aware. Hopefully it stays up. If not, hopefully, I don't know whether Liam also uploads on Rumble, which is obviously much more pro-free speech and much less censorious. So hopefully if it does get taken down off YouTube, it'll be available there. But either way, that's the plan for tomorrow evening. As it stands, I will let you guys know as soon as I can. Got some interesting stories to go through today. Some really gut-churning stories as well to go through, so viewer discretion advised. Some things which I wanted to go over in the last episode but didn't have time, so that was on a quite a large time constraint. Got a bit more time now, so we'll go through it. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube or anything like that, make sure you like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Hit the notification bell, go follow me on Rumble. Like I said, the sword of Damocles is constantly over people like myself's heads, so make sure you go follow me on there as well, just in case it happens to fall, which it could obviously do at any point. Getting straight into today, first thing to go over, which I think is very, very important to go over, looking at especially the EU and Western governments in particular, how censorious they're becoming, how mass surveillance they're becoming, all of these different things, especially in relation to some of the other stories we'll be going through as well. You've got to think of how this ties in with censorship, how this ties in with surveillance, how ultimately it's because the government doesn't want you talking about these things, that it's important to look at things like this. And obviously everything going on behind closed doors, it's a club and you're not in it, and you have, in many instances, foreign bureaucrats, right, in the EU, in the World Economic Forum, in the UN, BlackRock and State Street and all of these other, $1 trillion, I don't know if they're actual $1 trillion, but the collective assets of BlackRock totals in the multi-trillion dollars. I know that. How much land they've been buying, how many properties they've been buying and all of that stuff to fuel the replacement agendas. Our future is increasingly being dictated more and more and more by these people, and obviously they're doing everything behind closed doors, which is what Disclosed TV was highlighting recently. It's only a very short article, but factoring it in with how these governments want to institute ever greater surveillance states and all of these things, we've got some follow-up stories to go through, which I think is extremely important, ties in with the wider censorship regime of YouTube and mainstream media and all of these other things as well, things that they don't want you talking about, so they hope that they're able to slip their initiatives through, under the radar, so to speak. So what's been happening recently, and I haven't got the full article because it's locked behind a paywall. I believe it's in the German outlet, Berliner Zeitung or something like that, I believe is where the full article is located. But Disclosed TV put this up on their site recently, which I think is quite interesting to show. EU plans to pass the chat control behind closed doors. And what the chat control is, legislation. It threatens user privacy by potentially allowing the scanning of private chats. And obviously you see Pavel Durov down by here. Obviously this is essentially what they did with Telegram a little while ago, as far as I'm aware. They basically, I believe it was the French government at the time, basically forced him to accept this, either like a backdoor or some of this, ways for the government to get into people's private chats, because Telegram was one of the few that actually had, I believe it was either an encryption or a system whereby governments couldn't get access to people's private messages and stuff like that. And Pavel Durov was very staunch at the time in standing up against the government intrusion, similar to how Chris Pavlovsky did when Rumble was under threat because they wouldn't go along with the censorship demands and stuff like that. And obviously now that's why you see so many people going over to Rumble. It was a massive thing in the beginning. It really did threaten them in the beginning, and they very easily could have, strangled Rumble in the crib if they managed to get their way. But obviously Rumble now having taken on that, what's the word I'm looking for? Not taking the easy way out, so to speak, not taking the easy way out, in many ways being massively rewarded now. They're thriving. They're absolutely thriving. Big creators, and Rumble Premium and all of this stuff like Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, The Quartering, Andrew Wilson, all of these other guys that are quite big on Rumble as well. Obviously, a lot of them still post to YouTube and stuff like that. But it has to be censored a lot. Rumble doesn't tend to have that problem, and it's growing more and more and more. I think in recent years, Rumble was the most downloaded, or at least above YouTube in App Store downloads. Might have been in the US, might have been worldwide, I can't remember. At the moment, not so big in the UK, right? Not so big in the UK at the present moment in time, but it is growing. It is growing. Because people want to be able to speak freely. They want to be able to speak freely and not have to capitulate to the demands of some bureaucrat and not talk about certain things because some bureaucrat doesn't want you to talk about it. It's very, very important that we keep that alive. But what they're now doing is for this bill, right, which is being, as I said, it's being passed behind closed doors, so don't want anybody knowing about it, which obviously pretty much says it all, right, and is also going to be approved without discussion, which is also interesting to report. Says whether it is the heads of the EU just deciding they're going to ham fist, through something, or push something through with an iron fist, right, without discussion. They're not willing to discuss these kind of things. Usually, leads you down the path of thinking, maybe this is either not all above board, right? They don't want people asking questions, right? Or it's something that they deem as so imperative to their agenda, their very damaging agenda, to where they're not going to stop for questions. They're just going to push it through regardless. Although the formal requirement for state-mandated oversight is removed, the new draft allows providers to implement quote-unquote voluntary risk mitigation. That's what they're calling it. Voluntary risk mitigation strategies that could still lead to chat scanning. Experts warn this might open the door to future state intervention. While countries like Denmark and France support these measures, opposition remains strong in states like Poland and Germany. A review clause could also lead to mandatory controls later. And Pavel Durov saying that the EU weaponizes people's strong emotions about child protection to push mass surveillance and censorship. Their surveillance law proposals conveniently exempted EU officials from having to have their own messages scanned. And he references a post that helps explain why. You can go look at that on the links down below in the description if you wanted to. But he's absolutely right. It's a classic case, again, everything we're seeing where it is increasingly totalitarian legislation, whether it is the net zero, whether it is the surveillance, whether it is now this chat control legislation, it's all rules for thee, but not for me. That's what it is. Our politicians going, you guys have the rules, we don't. Right? And that flagrantly goes against, obviously, many of the legal customs that outlined, especially in Britain, for example, in documents like the Magna Carta. Right? So this is obviously very, very concerning. Very, very concerning. And it makes you think, again, how they've censored people in the past. They censored people trying to get information about the COVID vaccines and the damages that were being done. They tried censoring people who tried to have a anti-LGBT or gender-critical stances, right? Despite the fact that they knew they were doing irreparable harm to children. And in fact, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about later. Rupert Lowe has put a letter through, it was like an emergency letter through a couple of days ago, urging MPs to sign against this new trial that's coming in, which is basically going to, again, conduct this mass study on young children with regards to puberty blockers, also known as chemical drugs, right? There's no reason for such a study to be done, right? There's no reason for such a study to be done, yet the government is trying to push it through anyway. Although the Supreme Court ruled on the biological reality of male and female, the government is, they're not going to accept these things. They have their agenda. They have, quote unquote, their truth, right? They're going to try and push through no matter how much it goes against the very fabric of reality, right? And they don't care how many children they have to damage. They don't care how many families they have to tear apart. They don't care how much totalitarian legislation has to be brought in. They want this outcome, and they are going to be dogged. Like a dog with a bone is how they're going to be with trying to get the outcomes that they want passed, right? And we should be thinking now, no matter what happens in terms of legal framework, no matter what happens in terms of whatever framework you want to look at, the government, the officials within it, these hyper-zealous activists, which is what they are not going to stop. They are not going to stop. They haven't let the law stop them before. They're not going to let the law stop them now, are they? And, other things which they might not want, people covering or whatever, or, again, we spoke about in the last episode about the woman that used a word that she wasn't supposed to, and then that resulted in her getting, not a custodial sentence, but community hours, unpaid work, all of this stuff, right? Because she used a word in a private correspondence with a former friend that ratted her out to the police, right? Describing somebody who hospitalized her using a slur that was deemed homophobic, right? And if you watch the YouTube version of that podcast, not the Rumble one, you'd have seen that I tried to be a little bit more comedic with that kind of stuff, with the censorship stuff, with some of the graphics I flashed up on screen and stuff like that. So you should go and watch that if you haven't done so already. The YouTube one is obviously a lot more censored, but there's a little bit more attempted comic relief in there. But one of the things that made the rounds recently, which I think is really important to talk about, is again, talking about misinformation and all of this stuff surrounding the farmers' protests, which took place 2 days ago. So farmers were protesting in London, and they took their tractors down, and they seemed to block off part of the road, and people were getting up in arms, because then some of the farmers ended up getting arrested, right? Some of the farmers ended up getting arrested, seemingly for flaunting the same regulations that the pro-Pally mob and all these guys were flaunting on every single one of their protests, and none of them were arrested. They had equipment like tractors confiscated and all of this stuff, right, taken away. Not a good look. Not a good look if that's how we're treating our farmers, who are increasingly being subject to more and more totalitarian legislation, whether it's the stuff around Bovea, stuff around the inheritance tax, which is literally just a death tax, which is just disgusting, right? It's not morally justifiable in any sense, at least in my opinion. But they went down to London, and they blocked off part of one of these streets with their tractors, and this is the bad optics, if you will, of this situation, which I'll pull up on screen for you in a moment. They blocked off part of the road with their tractors, and it ended up resulting in an ambulance not being able to get past, at least for a certain period of time. So there's an ambulance in this video, which I'll play for you in a moment, who's trying to get past this long line of tractors. And obviously you can see if you're watching the video, you can see the ambulance in the background with its blues and twos on. It could not get through for a period of time, but as far as I'm aware, it was not held up for very long, right? And they were able to get past afterwards, I believe, after the farmers moved to allow the ambulances to pass. So as far as I'm aware, or the ambulance, sorry, to pass, as far as I'm aware, it's not like the Just Stop Oil guys where they didn't give a when they were stopping ambulances, right? As far as I know, the farmers, despite the reports you see circulating online at the moment, there's a lot of false information going around about this, which I'll go over in a moment. They did not intend to stop anybody from getting medical care. It did not, however, stop certain people from circulating completely, verifiably false videos, AI generated, showing one of these supposed farmers, right? Showing one of these supposed farmers inciting a crowd to block ambulances at a rally yesterday. Sorry, not yet. This was posted yesterday, so it would have been yesterday relative to this post. And a lot of people have ran with it and, you know, have called for many of the farmers to be imprisoned or worse, when it's clearly an AI-generated video, which I'll show you in a moment. You can see from the stage, some of the banners on the lower part of the stage don't make sense. The numbers warp. It's not set up in any way that a lot of these protests are set up. The audio is clearly edited because there's no natural background noise, which you would have at one of these events. There's none of the natural sound engineering that you would have when you see reports being done out in the open air. You have natural wind, you have natural, you know, hubbub of the streets or whatever, natural background noise and all of this stuff. And it doesn't sound like the audio, like you will hear from this podcast, where the AI tool is used to clean up the audio and make it sound like more studio, more pleasant to listen to. You don't get that when you're out in the open air, unless obviously some sound engineering has been done afterwards. Not usually what happens when these things are reported on in real time. You can clearly see that the audio has been edited and the video is completely AI generated. You can tell by some of the mouth movements, you can tell by some of the jacket movements, and you can tell just by the complete video itself, right? And the fact that no stands were set up like this, at least as far as I'm aware, for these farmers' protests. But they did actually, again, the person who posted this called to lock these people up for life. I have no idea if they are a satirical account or not. They call themselves a preemptive journalist, right? And I think it is a satirical account called former. They call themselves former white in their bio, and it is a picture of what appears to be a Simpsons character in their profile picture. But this is the video that was making the rounds, and many people seem to have been not only fooled by it, but actually donated to a GoFundMe for a guy that supposedly died in the back of this ambulance, but seemingly does not exist. But here's that video for you, which I'll bring up for you on screen now.
If we have to block ambulances, so be it. Save our farms. If we have to block ambulances, so be it. Save our farms. If we have to block ambulances.
So it's obviously fake. It's obviously fake. And in fact, if I bring it back up on screen and just have a look at like the jacket movements, have a look at the movements of the mouth. It's completely unnatural, right? It's clearly been AI generated. Look at the bit where it says down the bottom, the times 70, 100,000, whatever it is. It's clear warping. There's clear little bits where the AI hasn't quite been able to generate a fully, realistic image, so to speak. Some of the letters are obviously completely out of proportion. It's clearly AI generated. It's clearly AI generated and designed to make people look bad and libel them, because then these farmers were libeled as murderers. Many people did actually think that these people then resulted in someone's death, right, off of the back of posts, which I can't help but think that there's these two accounts working in cahoots to scam people. And does make me think that when you look up where these accounts are, one of them is based in the United Kingdom, the other one is based in Europe, right? And they do appear to be two satirical accounts, but I don't know whether this is a fake screenshot or whatever, but I'll bring this up on screen for you in a moment. This is a guy that supposedly died when an ambulance was blocked by farmer terrorists, and there is a link to the GoFundMe there as well. In fact, just to see if we can dispel any potential myths in real time, we'll see where this actually takes us. We'll see where this link actually takes us. Oh, there we go. So actually the fundraiser has been taken down. So this is actually what when you click the link, it actually comes up with. So fundraiser not found. So that might be the case now. I don't know where the fundraiser did exist at one point. And they did actually get some donations, and they actually scammed some gullible people out of this. But supposedly a person by the name of Dan Glebitz, right, who again seemingly another one of these satirical accounts. His bio says former Labour candidate. He says politically black, expert hurt neutralizer. And he said that his dear, sweet, handsome uncle, who died in the back of an ambulance in London after it was blocked by farmers, he would have made a full recovery if only he'd reached hospital sooner. So here is that post in question that I just read for you. Now, the thing is, like I said, it does appear that people were taken in by this fundraiser. People were taken in by this fundraiser and taken in by the video as well, and that apparently it is a person by the name of Colin Brian Gleibitz, who was the guy in the back of the van, in the back of the ambulance, which is technically a van, I suppose, yeah, technically, I suppose, back of the ambulance, and we'll go through why this is relatively humorous in a moment. It wouldn't be a humorous story if it was true. This is the guy that supposedly died, and you can see here, this is another account that's taken this information and ran with it. And what's the views at time of... It's only 57 views on this post. And you'll see here as well, it is completely fake. Because the person in question, although I can't find any images of this person with the beard, I can't find any images of this person with the beard. And after scrutinizing Grok a little bit, because I asked, did anybody die at these farmers' protests yesterday? Right? And Grok confirmed that the entire Colin Brian Gleibitz story is a complete hoax, satirical meme that started circulating on X in the 26th to 28th of November, obviously around the time of the farmers' protests. It originated from parody troll accounts like Real Dan Gleibitz, who's the account that's based in Europe, by the way, so no idea if this person who actually runs this account is actually based in the UK, right? I'll quickly double check to see if it shows where he joined from. North America Android app was where this account joined from or connected via. So again, likely somebody who's not based in the UK, seemingly profiting with a fake fundraiser, or with a real fundraiser, but obviously for a completely fake, not purpose, reason, over an event that didn't happen. It's completely fabricated. And then was amplified by left-leaning pro-Palestine accounts who are mocking or attacking the farmers that obviously they need no reason to, but it was just another thing that people tried to use to attack the farmers because they want to institute more of this, communist-style government state. They want to appropriate the farms from the farmers, right? They want to do massive land grabs and all stuff like that. So that's why they wanted to attack the farmers. And circulate these lies to do so. And the person in the photo is actually Luke Akehurst, who is very much still alive, first off, and he's a Labour NEC member. And they likely chose this guy, I don't know, because he seems to also be a pro-Israel activist, at least according to Grok's breakdown. Anyway, the name Colin Brian Gleibitz seems to be fabricated for the meme, and there's zero news reports, obituaries, or any real-world trace of this person. So there's no BBC, there's no Telegraph, no Guardian, or any other reports of any ambulance being blocked for an extended period of time, or anyone dying as a result of the farmers' tractor protest in London. When I talk about the video which dropped on my YouTube channel earlier and Rumble earlier on today, right? This would obviously be, first off, this would obviously be very politically advantageous for people to run with this for the bureaucrats in the EU that want to institute more of this, right? So if they want to institute the chat control, and if they want to institute more of the censorship, imagine people that tried to talk about this, like people were trying to talk about the truth about George Floyd's death back in, the aftermath as BLM were rioting, right? They were obviously censored. The medical reports were obviously censored. Derek Chauvin had no way to have a free and fair trial, right? Imagine people tried to talk about this, and then your government deemed as, no, you're not allowed to talk about this, right? You heard Joe Marsh say, in cases where they wanted to put in like this group libel legislation, the truth is not a defense. Well, you wouldn't be defended by the truth. You wouldn't be defended by the truth being that this is an AI-generated video and all of this stuff is completely fake. Right, if people were taking this and run with it, and then they went on to burn down somebody's farm or whatever. They found out who the guy is. They found out where his farm was. One of the guys that was arrested, right? They went down and attacked his farm or whatever. All based on lies. We saw it with BLM, Summer Love, all of this stuff. We saw it with BLM when they were rioting based on a lie. When they were rioting and burning down entire cities based on a lie. You think people wouldn't go burn down a farm on a lie? So, regardless of whether it's satirical or not, you know, people do believe this stuff. You're seeing there, people do believe this stuff. You'd be surprised how many people will be taken in by it. Right? You'd be very, very surprised. But the biggest thing is, imagine then that these bureaucrats don't want you to be able to speak the truth on these things. They don't want you to be able to highlight that this is false, right? And we see you get enough of the other medias to pass a lie there, and it'll be, as Orwell said, you know, the lie became the truth. So this is why we really, really should be concerned, obviously, about the rise of AI anyway, because pretty soon it's going to be indistinguishable to be able to distinguish AI from reality. That's a scary thought. And not only that, the increasing legislation that is not only just coming in with regards to censorship and surveillance, but is then going directly into your private communications, right? That's going to even stop you from discussing these kinds of things. They hear you, if you use a word that they don't like, or you start discussing a quote-unquote taboo topic on your text messages or on your X messages or on your WhatsApp or on your Telegram or whatever, the next thing you know, you end up with the Stasi at your door, right? Pulling you in for, you know, anti-government or hate speech or whatever. Then obviously everything is designed to be done behind closed doors so that you never notice. Sadly, the reality is that the vast majority of people still don't understand what's going on. They've still yet to notice. They've still yet to wake up, which is why it's important that you share these videos and make sure that, you know, this message gets out there, but also other people who want the same message as well. And saying, no, we are sleepwalking into communist globalist tyranny. And by the time most people realize, it would likely then be too late. So they need to realize now. They need to realize now the threat posed by mass unchecked immigration, right, that we never voted for, right, that sentiment has been strongly against for decades in the UK. They need to understand, because this next story is going to churn your stomach, ladies and gentlemen. Viewer discretion advised, right? But we need to talk about it, because the story we're going to talk about afterwards exemplifies everything where the government will bring the problem in and then do everything possible to not solve the problem whilst looking like that they want to. You would have seen this story. It broke a couple days ago, on the 25th of November, so 3 days ago. Attack horror as young Italian couple are surrounded by 3 migrants who smash into their car and force boyfriend to watch as they his 18-year-old fiancée. Now, I'm not going to hold back on the details and stuff like this, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I said viewer discretion is advised for this story. Be warned, it is not pleasant. It is not pleasant, to say the least. It is absolutely unspeakably horrific what these, you know, young Italians had to go through. Particularly highlights how they feel and the response of our government. Just think about it, that the response of our government is nothing but policing people's responses to things like this, and how emboldened these people feel. How emboldened these people feel to do this this is not on our home soil, but speaking from the perspective of the Italians, not to do it on their home soil, to their people, knowing that the government is on their side, not on the side of their own citizens. A man was held down and forced to watch as migrants who smashed into his car his 18-year-old fiancée in Italy. The couple had parked in a quiet corner of Torre Test, a park in the eastern part of the capital, for privacy, minutes before they were surrounded by a group who attacked their vehicle. I don't know if the article actually says. I believe that these are 3 Moroccans, from what I understand. These are 3 Moroccans. Police said the attackers broke the window and first pulled the man, 24, from the car, before forcing the woman out as she tried to cover herself with an item of clothing. The man told cops he was restrained by two of the attackers and his fiancée was dragged a short distance away. As she was assaulted, she screamed for help, begged them to stop, and even threatened revenge, but was unable to break free. After the attack, all three perpetrators fled the scene. The couple, both Italian, then contacted the police, filed a report. According to the authorities, the couple were terrified and confused. Cops also added it was possible that there were up to 5 attackers involved. Officers have since arrested 3 Moroccan men on charges of gang and robbery. 2 were traced by Rome's flying squad unit and detained only days ago after the attack, which was October the 25th, and a third was picked up in Verona. Investigators said the arrests were kept quiet whilst they continued gathering evidence. Fingerprints lifted from the shattered window match the men who have been arrested. Officers also said the attack began as a robbery as the couple's belongings were taken during the assault. The attackers are believed to be known drug dealers. Confirming that the police are still looking into whether additional men were involved, the detective said the investigation isn't closed. And in November last year, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni linked migrants, particularly undocumented ones, to the country's increase in violence. And before she was elected, she posted a gruesome video of a woman being raped by a migrant on a pavement in Piacenza. So you can read more of that article down below if you want. They list some other cases as well. A helpless 13-year-old girl in February 2024 was brutally raped for half an hour by a group of Egyptian migrants in Catania after she was dragged to a public bathroom. She claimed both minors arrested her. Think about it, this culture where they're encouraging, children basically to rape other children. What do we have to gain from association with this whatsoever? It was the minors that assaulted her as the rest of the gang restrained her. Another case in October of 2024, an asylum seeker was alleged to have impregnated a 10-year-old girl after he raped her. A 28-year-old migrant from Bangladesh is said to have attacked the girl at a migrant centre in Lombardy. This is a story where you can easily cast yourself into the mind of that young man and also that young woman. And there's a interesting clip which I was going to bring up later. I'm going to bring it up now because I think it's pertinent, right? It's in relation to a slightly different conversation. But the wider concept of self-defense and tools for self-defense, especially the right to bear arms, stuff like that, is particularly pertinent with regards to things like this. If both of these people were armed, you could make the argument this never would have happened, right? Or that it would have been a lot less likely. It would have been a lot less likely, even if the guy was only able to get at a shot, right? Not even necessarily at anybody, but a shot that would have startled and let the assailants know that he had a gun. Maybe they would have simply cut and run, right? That could likely be what would have happened, because it is a massive equalizer. If you have just even a pistol or whatever with a 15-round capacity, let's just say, and one in the chamber, or even just, Stephen Crowder's thing where he does the 7+1 segment. If you just have 7 plus 1 in the chamber, that's 8 for 3 assailants. You've got, an average of about 2 shots to not even kill them necessarily, but scare them away. Obviously, it would have been better if he was armed, that these people then would have forfeited their lives the minute they even so much as approached the car. Their lives will forfeit, right? Now, I'm not saying that as in anybody that approaches your car at any point should have their life forfeit, right? But the minute a group of people come up to your car and show that they're trying to break into your car, that is their life forfeit. And that's the way that it should be in a just society. These are not people, and that's why, again, it's particularly disgusting when a lot of these people, to sort of fool people, whether it's to try and rob them or set them up for some kind of robbery or whatever, you'll have a woman go out and pose as like a abuse victim or something like that to try and lure somebody back because there's a gang waiting to rob them or something like that, right? You've seen people use those tactics before. But if you have somebody just coming up to the car because they need help, okay, you use your discernment. And then if they pose themselves to be a threat, you simply deal with the threat. That is how it was understood since time immemorial, really. Because the only people that can really be the administrators of justice when it comes to matters like this, of life or death, or you have to act in that moment in order to prevent a tragedy happening, the only person who can administer justice is the intended victim. You can't be relying on police because police weren't there and they can't get there in time. The only person you can rely on is yourself. And that's why it has been extremely dangerous, and our people, citizens, have been made extremely more dangerous ever since their means of defense were taken away from them, ever since we decided on behalf of criminals to punish the innocent by putting in more controls on the innocent when criminals have already shown they don't care about those controls to begin with. There's no surprise then the criminals feel emboldened. Not to mention they know they'll probably get a lenient trial if they have the right skin color or religion or whatever, or they can just plead insanity or anything like that. What deterrent is there? The only deterrent that would be effective is a deterrent in the moment administered by the intended victim. You've seen there that she was not strong enough, and that's just the reality, because men and women are different. That's why the fact that what the trans activists try and tell you, men and women are different. And many women understand this. It drives me mad, and you might need to go watch this clip elsewhere because this clip will probably get pulled down. This clip will probably result in the not only just demonetization, but the video being taken down, right? Because Jubilee are really anal about this stuff, as far as I'm aware. But this is a woman talking about the question is to do with gun control, right, and gun ownership. I'm just trying to read the question. The prompt is just faintly at the top, but I'm just trying to read it. It is not worth the cost of gun deaths every, I believe it's year, to have the Second Amendment. I believe that's what it is. So it's a Second Amendment conversation, this surrounded format. But she's saying here, the gun is the ultimate equalizer. If I come across a 200-pound man, I'm not going to be able to fight back, which is true. Which is true. Ladies, if you don't believe me, right, go to a jiu-jitsu class. You won't even need somebody who's 200 pounds to show you how vulnerable you are. You know, particularly a man, right? And yes, when you get to a certain point, skill will come into effect, but weight and muscle mass and all of these things, right, and the biological differences between men and women will matter a lot more. It's why you have, sex-segregated categories of sports to begin with. These things were very well understood up until recently. But this is the clip there, and you see this, a liberal male who has his back to the camera. This woman, I don't want to guess what her weight would be. I don't know. I would be surprised if it was even north of going on, American imperial metrics. I think I'd be surprised if it was even north of like 120 or something like that, or 110, right? She's in good physical shape, and you can see that, right? She's not overweight at all, right? And then he says, oh, I don't know, you look kind of tough. You probably could. Completely delusional. Completely delusional, this absolute frigging beta male. But here is that clip. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this might get cut. So it'll be linked down below as well. It'll be linked down below in an X post, and you can go and find it there. So this is the clip in question.
If they were to think that firearms can be owned by anybody, that reduces the amount of them coming into my home in the first place. And second of all, if I were to have a gun, that is the ultimate equalizer. I cannot fight a 200-pound man off. And for me, it kind of raises the security.
You might be able to. Hey, look, here's the...
You look tough. You might be able to. Completely delusional. And this woman knows the policies this guy would want to put in place would make her a lot more vulnerable. They think a lot of how these men who are against, women having greater tools to protect themselves think, right? And there's no greater tool to protect yourself than a firearm, which could inflict lethal punishment. Which really is the, it's the most effective deterrent. It is the most effective deterrent, right? And ultimately, no matter what you do, when it's a serious crime, when you have somebody rampaging through the streets of Toulouse with a knife, for example, as we covered a good few months ago, or was it a couple of weeks ago? Is that a couple of weeks or months ago? It is ended by men with guns. The law knows this. They just want the monopoly on it. They just want the monopoly on it because then they can do whatever the they want. And they can allow whatever the they want. Think about how many gangs would have been stopped if you had every single father in a community, every single family that was armed and could be armed to the teeth, right? How many of those gangs do you think would have been stopped? How many of the atrocities that occurred for what's coming up now, 75 years would have been stopped? A lot. A lot. Just goes to show you can't trust the government, in my opinion, at least, with a monopoly on violence and a monopoly on force. Because you will inevitably at some point end up with tyranny. It's why the Americans value the Second Amendment so much, and it's why up until very, very recently, you know, the Americans got the concept for the Second Amendment from British common law, which is where they get a lot of the Constitution from. Yes, they made some changes and stuff like that, but a lot of the concepts and a lot of the principles, right, a lot of the customs, they got from us. And then we decided we wanted no part of it, and look where our country's at now. Makes you think maybe we were doing a good thing, before. Maybe a lot of the customs and laws that we had when we were an actual power in the world were good. I don't know. Worthy of a discussion, I guess. And what's the government solution? What's the government solution? Well, bless me. Everything but deal with the problem. Everything but deal with the problem. They won't deal in the cases of migrant crime, for example, of the people coming over and doing the crime. Because they say diversity is our strength, we're multicultural, we're tolerant, we're all this, right? So they won't deal with that. They won't allow the populace, the native populace, to defend themselves, in many instances denying that there's even such a thing as a native populace of Britain, right? What will they do instead? What will they do instead, you wonder? Well, take Rachel Reeves's campaign now to save lives with yet another installment of cracking down on the innocent to quote-unquote protect them. Tax kitchen knives, it's a judge is going to be telling Reeves, tax kitchen knives to save lives. That's where we are now. Remember all the memes that people were making before of when you had the videos of, the mock videos of stab vest companies, marketing based on, like the gang warfare between youths and making a joke out of London and places like it for the knife crime. And then people say, oh yeah, we need to blunt kitchen knives or whatever. Or we need to just blunt knives. No, as if it's not going to be possible to get a sharp knife if you're a criminal. Apparently, a £20 levy on pointed blades are going to reduce the risk of more killings like Southport. I tell you what would be a lot better of reducing more killings like what happened at Southport. Stop bringing them here and send them home. I think that would be much more effective. But of course the government can't do that because they would lose their voting bloc. They would lose large elements of their voting bloc. So they can't do that. Or they can, choose not to. Because their position of power and ensuring they get re-elected matters more to them than the safety of their citizens. Which is why now they're talking about £20 levies on kitchen knives. Again, the problem is me. The problem is me with the knife block in my kitchen, right? The problem is me with my knife block in the kitchen. That's why the girls in Southport got stabbed, right? That's the logic of this government. And I need to pay more. Now, I need to pay more. Of course, it always comes back, doesn't it? It always comes back to taking more away from the already up against it British person. It always comes back to that somehow, doesn't it? Taxes got to go up. We've got to break manifesto commitments, all of this stuff. We're now going to tax kitchen knives. Always comes back to more and more money from the needed British, doesn't it? To put more money into these same agendas that resulted in Southport, that resulted in 7-7, that resulted in the Manchester Arena, that resulted in Lee Rigby. Everything but deal with the problem. Because in order to deal with the problem, they need to realise that the people they demonised and the people they call all sorts of names, the people in many instances, some whom have died for opposing certain government initiatives, prominent one that was opposition to the war in Iraq and the lies around weapons of mass destruction comes to mind. They were right. And that the government was always evil. But the minute they admit that, there's no reason for them to exist anymore. There's no reason for them to have their positions anymore. And in fact, there's no reason in many instances why we should not enact the old punishments for things like treason. So what's actually happened? I know I've had the article up on screen a little while now, but Nick Madge has written to the councillor, or Nick Madge has written to the councillor, urging her to impose the levy as an incentive for manufacturers to phase out pointed knives and replace them with safer versions with rounded ends. Yes, it's the person that doesn't want to cut their steak with a butter knife that is the problem. Yes, it's the problem. They're the problem. Not the people who go to the streets screaming Allahu Akbar. Not the people who've said that they came here with no intention to integrate. And if you call them British, they actually take that as more of an insult than anything, right? They are not the problem. No, you are always the problem in the government's eyes. That should tell you all you need to know. The campaign for rounded knives is backed by Leanne Lucas, 36, a survivor of the Southport attacks in which Axel Rudakabana killed 3 girls and wounded several other people. Sadly, this is not an uncommon thing. We saw that in this really weird thing, which is akin basically to necromancy, that the ABC anchor, I can't remember what his name, I think he's been fired since, conducted an interview with an AI-generated version of one of the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre, which the parents basically created and programmed or had programmed for them so that they could feel as though they hadn't actually lost their son. And the mother apparently spends like hours a day talking to this AI chatbot. And you could tell in this interview, they programmed it to give all of the standard lefty programmed answers to things like gun control and all of this stuff, right? What would you do differently? And you could tell there was an AI program to say all of the standard lefty talking points, but it was meant to be depicted as though it was this victim of the Sandy Hook massacre, which obviously would be impossible to get a true take of what they would think, because sadly they are dead. Right? It is truly awful the extent that these leftists will go to push their narratives. But sadly, it does go to show that often when these tragedies happen, because of the way that we've been, because of the way that our thoughts have changed, because of the propaganda, because of all this stuff, because we've thought that giving the government more and more power to stop these things is actually going to result in these things being stopped when it hasn't. It's only gotten worse, right? Because we've been deemed now that to administer any kind of justice ourselves, or to want to have things to protect ourselves, protect our family, protect our home for these things, that when these tragedies happen, it can send these mechanisms, these feedback loops into overdrive in the minds of these people. And sadly, that's what you're seeing here. You saw that as well in the aftermath, I believe, of Austin Metcalf out in America. Sorry, my hair is going inside my hood. I desperately need a haircut. I really do need a haircut. I like my hair this length, but it does get a bit annoying. Point being, there was this prominent influencer, I can't remember his name, but one of the more really quite hard right-wing types in America. And I believe he's actually on the phone with Austin Metcalf's father at one point. And because you saw Austin Metcalf's father tried to go to the press conference that the lawyer for his killer, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and he was scolded for going there. He told his presence wasn't wanted, essentially. So that this kid had murdered his child, right? And he went there seemingly, and they've already said that they'd forgiven the guy and all of this stuff, despite the fact that there's really no reason to, because as far as I know, he hasn't shown any repentance. He hasn't shown any repentance or even acknowledgement that he's wrong. They started to GoFundMe for him and all of this stuff, right? And then when he was on the phone with this influencer, said, look, I don't support you. Take my son's image down off your site or whatever, which you can understand, right? Maybe he doesn't want his son's image being used in this way. Okay, fair enough. But the guy then said, look, we're trying to prevent this from happening again. It's your weakness. And he was very blunt with him on the phone, in fairness. It's your weakness that's going to result in more of this happening. And I don't mean that when I apply that to this example here now, to insinuate that in any way that these people are weak and stuff like that in and of themselves. They've gone through a very traumatic incident. And the mixture of propaganda and the ideas that we've been groomed to that have been groomed to accept, right, and the thought process we've naturally allowed to fall into, it's hard to break out of. And you can understand why they would have this response. You understand why they would have this response, because they will not allow themselves to ever think that there could be something innate to the perpetrator, that resulted in it. Societal guilt, not individual guilt. Oh, it's all our fault. It's all our fault. So we need to dull our kitchen knives, as if that's going to do anything, right? Right. You have the Pakistani gangs. It's quite clearly all our fault. So we need to cut off our dicks to fight. It's that kind of idea, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But you can understand why people like Leanne Lucas would feel this way. I do not believe it is the correct solution. I believe they're completely wrong in the solution they would want to implement here. I believe it is just completely needless. It's giving more money to a government that is focused more and more and more on bringing more people like this here, right? And actively cracking down on people who actually want these things stopped and want things to go back to normal, want Britain to return to the way that things were, want people to be safe, want people to have means of administering justice themselves, right? Because that's the ultimate safety. Yeah. So basically, all it's going to do is going to give more money to a government that's focused on furthering these initiatives more and more and more, and taking resources away from just regular people, but also then people who would actually want to do something about these problems. That's basically the idea, right? Giving the government more money, giving this government especially more money to solve these things is not going to work. Because if they want to solve them, they could solve them like that, if they wanted to. They will do everything to seemingly look like they're trying to solve the problem without actually solving the problem, and it is paper thin. It is absolutely paper thin. Because you cannot trust anything. You seemingly cannot trust anything that this government will tell us, right? When they say they're going to do something that's actually going to benefit the British people. How many lies? You cannot count how many lies have been told by successive governments, right? I'm not just talking about one political party either, one political government or whatever. Successive governments. Rupert Lowe highlighted this recently, and what I thought was a really, really good example. He posted this on X a couple days ago. I think it was about... Right, there we go. My mouse decided... What the hell's going on with this? Right, there we are. What the... This is very odd. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. My computer wasn't playing ball. My mouse was playing up. It wasn't scroll wheeling properly. So, this is a post from Rupert Lowe that he put up on X recently. And it just goes to show how many How many? I've just lost. Oh, great. I've just lost it now. All right. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Tech issues came back. But I quickly had to pause it just so I could reframe something, which I'm going to bring up on screen now. You put this post out on X, which I'm trying to scroll through, but my scroll wheel seems to be playing up, or the post itself seems to be playing up. Yesterday morning, put out this statement saying that I have undeniable evidence that the Home Office has been lying to MPs and the British public about the number of absconding/missing illegal migrants and foreign criminals. On 3rd of September, I asked the Home Secretary the following question: what estimate she has made of the number of foreign nationals who have absconded after being served with a deportation order. Minister Alex Norris answered the Home Office does not hold any central record of the requested information. And then he puts in all caps, false. He has seen the evidence, so the Home Office isn't disputing it. The answer is 736, so 736 in the total absconder pool for foreign national offenders. Next, I don't know where he's citing this from, by the way. I'm assuming it's a whistleblower. I asked the Home Office the following question on January 20th. What information her department holds on the number of irregular migrants defined as absconders. Angela Eagle said the requested data is not readily available or readily accessible from published statistics and could only be collated and verified for the purpose of answering this question at a disproportionate cost. And he says this was an absolute lie. They have a total absconder pool which currently stands at 53,298. It's not disputed by the Home Office. The Telegraph asked them, and they've said the following. The Home Office has refused to confirm whether the figures are accurate, saying it does not comment on speculation. Civil service speak for the figures are accurate. A little bit like, if you think about it, when they don't put the identity of the person who committed a heinous act in the headline, right? They don't say anything about him, and then they put it, they turn the comments off. They turn the comments off on the article, and instantly then you have a pretty good idea of either what the person looks like or where they're from or what type of name you're going to see or anything like that. One of the quote-unquote usual suspects. She did not give me any data or make reference to these proven Home Office data sets, and he is pursuing this through the relevant route. I believe the Home Office is deliberately misleading both MPs and the British public about the scale of illegal immigration, not to mention legal immigration, right? Legal immigration. But even now, illegal immigration could potentially be a lot higher than we actually think it is, or at least people running around the country with no record of who they are or where they are. Well, a record of who they are, but not a record seemingly of where they are, right? We have absolutely no idea, and it could be a lot worse than what we've been told, right? Could be a lot worse than what we've been told, which in this instance is a little bit better than what we're told because the Home Office and all of the other offices don't want to tell us anything. They want us to be deliberately misinformed. And also their inept failure to handle these unvetted criminals. Further, whistleblowers are coming forward. We are working on more already. And he says, if they've lied to an MP about these stats, what else are they lying about? It's a little bit like when they said that they're going to do things in the interest of Britain, right? It is every single thing that they say they're going to do. You were the enemy of, what was it, national renewal or something like that. Everything is a complete lie. Everything is a complete lie, and obviously they tried to dispute things. The big one that they said that they were going to go with, or seemingly that the is it Health Secretary Wes Streeting was caught on one of the cameras at an event, lambasting people with gender critical views as kooks and stuff like that. Basically hinting at what we were going to see, which is going to be more and more undermining of what the Supreme Court said, undermining and threatening vulnerable children, right, with irreversible medical procedures. So what's happened now? Rupert Lowe has written another letter, which I'll read in a moment, in opposition to this, which is good to see. I don't see many others talking about it, or at least they're only echoing his sentiment, right? He seems to be leading a lot of these initiatives, right? I don't even think I've seen Nigel Farage and any of the others of Reform talking about this. UK regulators have approved the first clinical trials of puberty blockers for children with gender dysphoria since a nationwide ban was imposed last year after the CAS review found evidence for the use in gender transition built on shaky foundations. So now, quote unquote, ever moral, ever ethical, right, and ever so enlightened scientific community, right, is now trying to run a study which nobody needs to run. It never, ever needed to be run. Let's make no mistake about that. Into these chemical agents for children. For children. And they're now going to be running the largest scale experiment. And we can already see where this is going. We already know how damaging these things are. We already know how damaging these initiatives are, right? This is going to be designed to give them seemingly some kind of citation that they can point to. They're going to try and rig it, at least in my opinion, in every single way, make it in favor of chemically children. It's not going to be, impartial. It's not going to be scientifically rigorous or anything like that. Not to mention, as we've discussed now, there's no reason to run it. There's no reason to run it because, for example, we've seen, in fact, I'll bring up another image now in a moment. I'm just going to go and find it a bit quick. It's a study I talked about a little while ago, and I'm glad I kept this screenshot around because I knew it would come in handy. I'll bring it up for you in a moment. With regards to children that will naturally pretty much grow out of these things, right? They may be confused in the moment, but eventually they'll pretty much naturally grow out of it in the vast, vast majority of instances. UK regulators have approved the first clinical trials of puberty blockers for children with gender dysphoria since the nationwide ban. Led by the King's College London, the Pathways trial will recruit up to 250 children under 16 in England and Wales who have experienced at least 2 years of gender dysphoria, have started puberty, and can give informed consent alongside a parent or guardian. They cannot give informed consent. They're a child. They cannot give informed consent. And if the adult is going to be given informed consent, you seriously need to have a look at them. There's no reason to study this. There's no reason to mess with children's biology in this way. On what is a mental condition. There's no reason to mess with the biological aspect when this is a mental condition. In my opinion, they're doing this so that they can have quote-unquote data to point to justify rolling out these quote-unquote puberty blockers again. Participants will be randomized and either receive puberty-suppressing drugs plus non-medical care or non-medical care alone, with a 2-year follow-up. Subset will join Pathways Connect for brain scans and cognitive assessments. Young people with gender incongruence and their families have told us that they do not have the information they need to make informed choices about their care, said Deputy Chief Investigator Dr. Michael Absoud. The new studies launched today will give us more information specifically about puberty suppression and will closely monitor any impact on young people's development. Despite the current ban, some trial participants may continue treatment if deemed quote-unquote clinically appropriate. It's being funded to the tune of £10.7 million via our National Institute for Health and Care Research. Aims to provide robust evidence for informed care decisions. Well, I want you to have a look at this, and I'll see if I can find the citation and link it down below, but this is just based on the screenshots that I have that I took of the data at the time. This study in question is titled Development of Gender Non-Contentedness During Adolescence and Early Adulthood. It's an open access paper. It was published 2 years ago. Not even 2 years ago. 27th of February, 2024. Was when it was published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. So you can go and read it down below. But the biggest thing I want to point to, ladies and gentlemen, is, I believe, 2 aspects of the data set. So, what you tend to find, we're looking from the ages of 10 onwards here. And I'll bring this up on screen for you now. If I just zoom in just a little bit. This graph depicts the trajectory of groups of gender non-contentedness throughout adolescence and early adulthood. And a mean trajectory line is plotted for every group. Percentages refer to the percentage of individuals in a trajectory group of the total sample after the removal of individuals with class probability and individuals not placed in a class. So you're looking at three different categories here. One group who reported no gender non-contentedness, no confusion, no unhappiness with their quote-unquote gender, sex, right? None. A group that experienced none whatsoever. Then you have the group which reported decreasing gender non-contentedness over time. So as they got older, their feelings, their thoughts gradually came into alignment with what they are biologically, and there was no non-contentedness anymore. Basically, I know you're not supposed to say stuff like this with regards to topics like this, but they normalized. They normalized over time. It's basically the idea. And then you had the other group, which was reported as increasing gender non-contentedness over time. So basically, as time went on, they got more and more unsatisfied, more and more confused, or more unhappy, right, as they got older. And it's rated on a scale of never to sometimes to often. Right? As in, I wish to be of the opposite sex. So basically, how often do they think about this? I wish to be of the opposite sex. That is the benchmark, basically, of what it is here. Now, due to certain rounding, the percentages do not add up to 100, right? In this graph, I believe it adds up to 101, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just double check. So that would be... it adds up to 99. It adds up to 99%. Sorry, it adds up to 99%. So it's not a massive deal. It's not a massive deal. But that's only due to rounding. But what you see here, ladies and gentlemen, if I just quickly I'll bring this up on screen for you now. Bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, I'll bring it up in this format. Here we go. What do you notice? What do you notice? I discussed this in another podcast as well, on my old podcast, the Evidence-Based Excellence one. I think it was episode 23. I think it was. I can't remember, but I've taken some episodes off of that one, so it might be slightly different in terms of the number system now. The vast majority of kids, first off, never experience any gender non-contentedness. Perfectly fine all the way through to their young adulthood, and 30 would be the top of this graph, basically, but it's 25 is the top of this graph in this instance. The next largest block are those who decrease over time. They naturally decrease over time in terms of their gender non-contentedness. This group, by the way, only going from somewhere between never and sometimes. So you can see here on the left-hand side of the graph, this bit here, it starts off very low. All of these groups, first off, really never, between never and sometimes, thinking that they wanted to be the opposite sex anyway. And then the vast majority then, the next 19%, depending on the rounding, naturally then normalized over time. And it's only this very small section, 2%, that rose over the course of this point. So we're looking here. This is the time frame that they're looking at. Very slowly rose only in 2% of the analyzed sample in this study to only just over sometimes by the time they hit between 25 and 30. So in the vast majority of instances, you can say, ladies and gentlemen, it will just pretty much normalize. It will just pretty much normalize. But obviously, you're not allowed to say that. There's another bit of data set here as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, this is essentially, I gave a better breakdown of this study in that podcast, so I'll link it down below. It's one of the first ones I ever done when I first started getting into talking about podcasting and stuff like that. I mentioned I set up that other podcast to talk about studies with regards to fitness and training and all of these other things, right? Stuff that I spent ages studying. And what I wanted to go through here in this graph is that the study also looked at not only the development of gender non-contentedness during adolescence and early adulthood, but it also had a look at it in those who were, I believe, not situated in some kind of institutionalized environment, like a care environment. So think of it like, I don't know, some kind of pediatric mental facility or something like that, as far as I'm aware, versus those who actually were seemingly kept in some form of institution. In this study, and I'll bring this part of the methods section up on screen, this paper, as I said, is open access, and the citation, I think, was slightly wrong. Apparently, this was then published in May, according to the NCBI, right? But anyway, citation and link will be linked down below. So this is the methods section for this study. And it goes through pre-registration as using the different, waves, age at 22, age 25. That the last age it sort of cut off was around 26. But the participants themselves were data from the Tracking Adolescents Individual Lives Survey, or TRAILS. Now, they also had another branch of the participants in this study from what was known as the clinical cohort of the TRAILS CC, were also used and combined to enrich the sample, right? So this TRAILS clinical cohort, for those of you who don't know, participants from the TRAILS CC, TRAILS clinical cohort, were recruited from a large psychiatric outpatient clinic in northern Netherlands with the same target area covered by the population cohort. So you had children between 10 and 12 years of age who had been referred to this clinic at any point in their life regarding any mental health problem, were eligible for participation in TRAILS cohort, clinical cohort. This study, as I'll bring up now, also broke down clinical cohort versus non-clinical cohort, which I think is important to have a look at, and really shows how not only misguided, but that it's quite clear that the people, the kids who were in the clinical cohort somehow suffered much worse, it would seem, when we had a look at the data set itself. So in figure 1, there we go. Oh, it keeps doing this weird resizing thing for some reason. Right, okay. Anyway, in this figure 1, it actually compared clinical cohort versus non-clinical cohort. Clinical cohort being in red, non-clinical cohort being in blue. What do you notice when you look at these bar graphs, ladies and gentlemen? Those who are in the clinical cohort reported consistently higher notions of wanting to be the opposite sex, and it also took much longer for these things to seemingly normalize and decrease. Even going up to 25, you had some of this clinical cohort on a percentage scale. It was relatively lower, but it's over double. If you have a look at this area here, you can see every single time point measured, aside from the very beginning, and also at age 13, you have always significantly higher reports of wanting to be the opposite sex when they were in the clinical condition. So forgive me for being a little bit skeptical of these so-called scientists when they now want to bring this back on the table, when really, A, there's no reason to. But not only that, we've seen youths in clinical settings in these examples report higher notions of wanting to be the opposite sex than those who are out of clinical settings. So obviously, this is just part, again, of the continued attack at people's children. And this is these so-called academics that are participating in this, and our leaders, that the ultimate thing they want to do, because they're concerned with depopulation ultimately, that's the biggest thing they're concerned with, and rendering every single attack against, in this instance, the British people, the Western industrialized, politically non-compliant people as possible. They're doing everything they can to rejig it around and be like, oh, you're anti-science if you don't go with this position now. We've seen basically, if you leave kids the alone, most of them will naturally work themselves out of it, will naturally grow out of it, if you will. There's very few that won't. And if they're kept in clinical settings, outcomes seem to be worse in that regard. And that's why I'm very happy to see on this issue in particular that Rupert Lowe invited all MPs to sign a letter urgently calling for the Secretary of State for Health to immediately halt a new trial administering dangerous puberty-blocking drugs to young children. We cannot allow experimental drugs to be given to confused young boys and girls. We will not allow twisted ideologies to harm children. He's saying that we should shut this trial down. I completely agree with him. There's no reason for this trial to be run. There's absolutely no reason for it. I'll bring his letter up on screen for you now as well, ladies and gentlemen. It says, Dear Secretary of State, we're writing to you with profound concern and frankly disgust regarding the decision to authorize, I'm just cropping it a little bit so I can bring it up on screen a little bit better. Bear with me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. To authorize a new clinical trial administering puberty-blocking drugs to children as young as 11. This is a deeply unethical experiment, one which must be immediately halted. We cannot further expose children to such harmful medical interventions. The trial is not safe. It is certainly not ethically defensible. Absolutely. No child is born in the wrong body. To suggest otherwise in any way is a wildly irresponsible abuse of power and authority. Normalizing this attitude at all is immoral and dangerous. Exactly. They want to stop future generations from coming into this world. That's what they want to do. They're hell-bent on this Malthusian depopulation agenda. It's disgusting. It places vulnerable children into an experiment with drugs known to affect physical and mental health. No amount of procedural safeguards can disguise the reality that young boys and girls are being put in harm's way to satisfy political pressure. Administering experimental drugs to children for such vile reasons is repugnant. We cannot and must not repeat the catastrophic failures of the Tavistock era. We cannot allow twisted ideological pressure to override our duty to protect children. We urge you to intervene immediately, halt this trial, and initiate a full review of how such an outrageous decision was reached. Leave children alone. And in fact, that is exactly, from what I remember, I titled that podcast, which again, you can find down below. I talk about this study. That's actually the title of it. I believe it was Leave Children Alone, or Leave the Children Alone. And that's exactly what they should be doing. But they don't. They perceive themselves being in a war, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these people, they perceive themselves as being in a war. Your children are a target. You are a target. Anybody objects is a target. Anybody who objects is akin to being a Nazi, as they will say. People genuinely believe this. And the government are hell-bent on appeasing people, like we'll see in a moment. This ex-Antifa member, I believe it's an ex-Antifa member who's actually sitting down with Stephen Edgington. And how we haven't prescribed Antifa as a terrorist organization, I don't know, but obviously government is extremely left-leaning. They're very sympathetic to Antifa. You know, it's basically the militant wing of the government. So obviously they're not going to prescribe them. It literally outlines that these people don't kill you because you're an actual fascist. They call you a fascist to justify killing you. These people are every bit the fascist that they claim to be against. And they militantly, you know, go with the ideologies and support the ideologies that our government supports. You know, a lot of these people, they're radically pro-trans, and the target is your children. Many of these activists and many of these people, like what was his name? Really creepy guy who was on like TikTok and stuff like that, basically saying, "Oh yeah, we're coming for your kids. You know, you won't be able to stop us." I can't remember his name. Matt Walsh has done loads and loads of videos on him. If I remember in the post, I'll pull up his image so you can understand who I mean. But as mentioned, these people feel like they're in a war. These people feel like they're in a war, and you're a target. Your forefathers are a target. The people who you came from, right, who built this country, they're a target, and your kids certainly are a target. And they will go to any length to secure their aim. And you know, just think about this. And that this being not only being indicative of the conflict itself in terms of the physical aspects of it, right? But how these people think. How these people think. Okay, bear with. For some reason it didn't want to There we go.
To attack someone because they're a fascist, they say they're going to kill someone, or they think it's justified to attack someone because they're a fascist, for example.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, whether it's people deserve to die, they have no human rights. It's like calling someone a Nazi or a fascist. It's a way to just dehumanize them. You can do whatever to them. You can assault them. It's funny to them. They laugh about it. They don't kill you because you're a fascist. They call you a fascist so they can kill you. You know, it's just a way to dehumanize people and threaten them. Originally, they were trying to bully and
I mean, you saw that with Charlie Kirk. What can you say?
ways, or what, like Christian nationalists, you know, that show up to protests or events, they're bullying them. That's not the target anymore. Now the target is anyone that doesn't agree with them. Socially, when I'm not at a meeting, I'm just hanging out with people that I know, more and more they talk about acts of violence. They talk about guns or going to gun ranges, and it scares me.
Why do you think some of these...
It's funny how pro-gun they are when it suits them, right?
They feel as though they're under...
Again, you can't have a gun. You can't have a gun. If you want a gun to defend yourself, you're evil, you're this, you're that, right? It's perfectly fine when they want them. It's perfectly fine when they go to them. And obviously this is in America, so you can get a gun, you can go to a gun range and all of this stuff, right? It's funny how a lot of the biggest gun control people and going about gun violence and all of this stuff, radically pro-gun when it's able to be turned on their political opponents, and radically pro-gun when they are the ones with the monopoly on force via state, via all of this stuff, right? No, they just want to take away your means to defend yourself. They want to take away your means to protect yourself from state tyranny and to protect yourself, like those sad cases of the two Italians earlier, that if they'd had firearms would have likely been a very different outcome. Would have been a very different outcome to that situation. But again, they perceive that they're under attack. They perceive that they're in a war, and they're going to go for every single target that they can. And that's why they went after people's kids. They went after people's kids, guilting them with some of the greatest lies we've ever seen. Oh, would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son? Those kinds of things, right? They'll prey on every little emotion that you have, every fear that you have, and that your kid was going to commit suicide if you didn't put them on these irreversible drugs and all of this stuff. And in many instances now, we've seen so many of them that are growing up with this kind of regret, impaired biological function, right? Some of them never be able to have kids. Some of them never be able to experience an orgasm. Some of them have osteoporosis in their 20s. But yet you're the dinosaur if you don't think that this is the way of the future. It's disgusting. It's disgusting, but it's good to see that we have MPs like Rupert Lowe. I haven't seen Lee Anderson or Nigel Farage or anything like that talking about this. They may have done, but I haven't seen it. And I don't know who else has signed this letter at this present moment in time. It's something everyone should be against. It's kind of interesting where you see it's a kind of thing where people who have common sense in this country kind of have a little bit of line up with like Muslims and stuff like that. And people of all faiths, really. Because they tend to be very, very against this stuff. Muslim countries are very against not only just the trans stuff, but, homosexuality in general, obviously. So again, they oppose a lot of this stuff. It's kind of funny when you see the retards. Again, I know you're not supposed to say that. We'll see if it gets pulled on YouTube or whatever, or I might have muted it or whatever. In the what you could call them pedos from Palestine, or you could call them the what is it, the LGBT Palestine mob. And in reality, if they were actually in Palestine or Gaza or whatever, they get thrown from the rooftops, right? A lot of them, the reality is with these people, they're just stupid enough to be dangerous. They're just stupid enough to be dangerous. But make no mistake, the people at the very, very top that are espousing these ideologies and bringing these ideologies in, they know exactly what they're doing. And they know that they're willingly operating for evil. Now, speaking of evil, there's a few stories I wanted to go over, which is a little bit different now. We spoke about some of the other cases before. There's been quite a few cases I wanted to talk about that came up on my Facebook recently. When I go on Facebook, it's quite good because when I get like Wales Online articles with all of these other articles, it helps counterbalance things a little bit and gives me more stories to talk about, with regards to just crime or whatever in general. There's a couple of notable ones that I wanted to bring forward to showcase again good examples of justice being done, and also then showing that we are policing our own side, or we should be policing our own side, and we should be wanting justice to win at every single turn, right? Especially when our own people commit crimes, right? The biggest thing is like, oh, the right don't care when it's one of their own that commit crimes and stuff like that. No, we absolutely do. We absolutely do, right? And we're not going to shy away from giving examples of that. We're not going to shy away from calling for the death of our own if they do heinous crimes like James Waller, for example. There's been a few prominent examples I wanted to go through. Some really, really evil stuff. Some really, really evil stuff. So we have one example of a paedophile has been caught with thousands of indecent images of children, a 44-year-old Ian Anthony. And then again, this is an example for parents as well who really should be caring about who their kids are interacting with online and stuff like that. This guy used a woman's name online. He was going by a woman's name. And the judge told him he had healthy, degenerate, and lustful desires, to say the least. To say the least. So there's the guy. He's been sentenced to 32 months, which really you could say is not anywhere near long enough. But this is the guy, Ian Anthony, sentenced to 32 months in prison for possession of and distribution of indecent images of children. So what's more to say about this incident now? He had photos of babies being abused, right, as one. The babies were part of a collection of thousands of indecent images amassed by Anthony, who used the name Claire and had a picture of a woman as his online profile. Sending the 44-year-old defendant to prison, a judge told him that showing any interest in child abuse images served to create further demand for such material for those with unhealthy, degenerate, and lustful desires of people like you. Sean Cutter, prosecuting, told the court that an examination of the defendant's laptop and of his mega storage account found a total of 4,582 indecent images, including almost, it's the big thing here, including almost 600 Category A images showing the most extreme kinds of abuse. The court told investigators also found pictures showing he had shared more than 1,300 images with other members of group chats he was involved in, including 200 Category A images, and had engaged in conversations where he talked about having babies. And as I said, he went by Claire online and had a photo of a woman as his profile picture. So again, you never know nowadays. That's the biggest thing with this story at the moment. You really never know who you're talking to online, and especially like it's another reason why we should be concerned about AI and stuff like that, right? And voice changing software and all of this stuff. There's so many ways that these people will take advantage to get at your kids. Parents, you need to be really on your ones with regards to this. There's so many avenues. And Ryan Montgomery on Sean Ryan's show, for example, saying that anytime you have a child with an internet connection, anytime you have some kind of internet connection, a child is not safe, essentially. They need to have somebody looking over them. In many instances, we've seen that parents often get fooled by this kind of stuff as well. So it's extremely, extremely hard, but it's more of a matter to say that parents, make sure you're keeping an eye on your kids. And I've spoken before, it's one of the things that I actually really appreciate my parents for, is how protective that they were. How protective that they were. Many people call them, overprotective and helicopter and stuff like that. But looking back on it, it's completely understandable. And the time has only gotten so much worse. It's only gotten so much worse since I was a kid. It's only gotten so much worse since I was a kid. Now, another one. This is from Cardiff, I believe. Just goes to show the evil that we are capable of committing as well. And there's no other word to describe this, really. It's just pure evil. Cat punched to death by teenager who stabbed his partner in the leg. So this is now the case of a gentleman known as Stephen Cornish, who, I believe this was this year, this article is from yesterday, time of recording. He slammed the cat against the floor and walls and then grabbed the cat by the tail and punched it repeatedly until it died. This is from North Wales Live. This is pure degeneracy. You can see this guy here, obviously. He's 19 years old. An abusive boyfriend stabbed his partner in the leg with an 8-inch kitchen knife and killed her cat by repeatedly punching it. Whilst under the influence of drugs, he unleashed the attacks, quote-unquote, out of nowhere. Stephen Cornish had been in a relationship with his partner which deteriorated when he began acting violently towards her. In May, the victim was asleep at her home when she was awoken by the defendant, who picked up her cat and began to attack it. He slammed the cat against the floor and the walls. He then grabbed the cat by the tail and punched it repeatedly until it died. There's no words to describe this evil, man. There's no words to describe this evil, just unnecessarily cruel. And the biggest thing is with this, it shows that this kid clearly has a lot of problems. He should not be out in the society. He should not be out in the society. He needs not only to be not necessarily incarcerated in prison, if you want to go down that route, but he needs some serious psychological help in dealing with the vices that he has, and he needs to be sequestered away from society in order for that to happen. He's a danger not only to other people, but he's a danger to himself as well. He needs this as much as anybody else does. He was incoherent and began waving a kitchen knife before stabbing the victim in the right leg above the knee. Lucky he didn't catch the many of the big arteries that run through the leg, right? Through the quads. There's many big arteries that run through the quads. So lucky he didn't catch one of those arteries, because very quickly likely would have resulted in his victim bleeding to death. This is where I see it now. You're quite clearly seeing he has vices going on. He has a lot of trouble. He's a very, very troubled individual. And sure, he needs help, but he can't be allowed out in society whilst that happens, right? And you can't really show too much compassion in this instance, because this is where compassion to the guilty will be cruelty to the innocent. He said this apparently brought Cornish to his senses, and he apologized before helping the victim to the bathroom. She suffered a 1-inch laceration to her leg. He said, "I'm such a cunt, you can't be with someone like me, it just won't work." Maybe in this brief moment of lucidity, he's completely right? At least not in his current state. On July 10th and 11th, Cornish began to hit the victim over the head with a TV remote out of nowhere and dragged her across the floor before spitting on her and pulling her hair. He called her worthless and angry. On July 15th, the defendant slapped and elbowed the victim in her face and caused her a black eye. The final incident took place on July 16th, when Cornish was again incoherent and assaulted the victim with a metal mop pole, hitting her to the head. Lucky he didn't give her a concussion or worse. Suffered scram marks, bruising to the lower right calf, bruising to her right hand, a scratch to her back, and a cut to the back of her head. He had no previous convictions, but as a caution for battery and shoplifting. So we're talking here, let's go through a little bit of a timeline. So this first incident, it doesn't actually say when. This first incident, on July 10th and 11th, was when this first incident was. On July 15th and 16th, he committed more acts. Why wasn't he apprehended? After the first one? Is there any good reason why he wasn't apprehended after the first one? Maybe the only reason I can think of that she didn't file a police report. You know, some people, they get stuck into such a thought process of either thinking he can be different or thinking I can fix him or whatever it'll be, that they don't report certain things, you know, or they don't take things to the police or whatever. It's almost like giving the benefit of the doubt. But you have 4 separate instances here. 4 separate instances. July 10th and 11th, July 15th and July 16th. After these incidents, really after the first one, this never should have been allowed to happen. So is it ineptitude by the police? Is it suicidal empathy on the part of the victim? I do not know. But he pleaded guilty to causing unnecessary suffering to an animal. You bet. causing grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of assault conditioning actual bodily harm, and assault by beating. In mitigation, David Pinnell said the client has developmental issues, you don't say, and this is where I hope he gets the help that he needs. As a result of his childhood and upbringing, I don't know whether maybe he doesn't have a father in the picture or his father isn't very good. Usually that's the kind of common denominator when you see things like this, right? Not a good father to show you how to treat women correctly, or not a good father to just give you a role model on how to be a good man, right? And what you should be growing up to emulate, right? That's why the glorification and subsidization, particularly in America at the moment, of single motherhood is so damaging to young males. They don't have that role model. And also they don't have that authority. They don't have that authority when they get to a certain age to smack them down, not literally, and keep them in check. They don't have that greater masculine presence, so when they push their luck, they have some kind of repercussion from somebody that's stronger than them. Always know your place. And you don't end up treating women or anybody like this. Since his remand in custody, the defendant says he is drug-free and he has sought to obtain employment in prison. I hope that this can be a good example of a true evil being turned into a true good, right? But he only got 15 months detention in a Young Offenders Institute. I think just from the magnitude of the crimes that he committed, it needs to be a lot longer, right? He killed her cat, for a start, in one of the most brutal ways that you could describe. He stabbed her. He hit her with a metal mop pole. He slapped and elbowed her. He spit on her, pulled her hair, dragged her across the floor. He had how many counts? So, causing unnecessary suffering to an animal, grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of assault, occasional actual bodily harm, and assault by beating. 15 months? Are you kidding me? He's 19. Well, then you could say he's not a child. He has all the legal rights and responsibilities of an adult. But yet, 15 months in a Young Offenders Institute is apparently what we call justice. It's what we call necessary punishment, should we say. When people say that we're a soft touch, it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue a lot of the time. And finally, the one story I wanted to go through as well, this is particularly disgusting. Luckily didn't result in anything being murdered, but could be said to come close. It's where, again, we should not forget that we are capable of committing grave evil as well. Is a little bit of a more important stuff that we're going to go through towards the end of this story, which again harkens back to a lot of the things we talk about as well. Bullying boyfriend preyed on vulnerable woman in long campaign of abuse. So this is a man known as Anthony Manson, quickly realized the woman was vulnerable and in the middle of a marriage breakdown when he worked through the abuser's playbook to prey on her. This is Mason in question. I don't mean to be like maybe they were warning signs, but maybe they were warning signs. First off, being that Anthony Manson isn't his actual name. In fact, it's not his actual name, and he actually changed his name later on in the story, which we'll tell you about in a moment. A bullying boyfriend has been jailed for just 8 years, and you'll see why that is a miscarriage of justice as well, after turning a wealthy divorcee's off-grid dream into a nightmare. Manson, 68 from Tinton in Monmouthshire, fooled his then-girlfriend into believing he was the one for me when her unhappy marriage from her husband ended. A court heard how she moved into a country caravan with her £280,000 divorce settlement. So again, why he was working on her. Again, maybe when they were talking before this was going on, or whilst the marriage was sort of breaking down, a conversation like this would have been had. And, there's another motive there as well. But Manson started a horrific horrific campaign of abuse over the following 6 years. during which time he had cut her contact from family and friends and even forced her to stand outside naked to pray. Keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Why would there be need to pray? And again, just the forcing her to stand outside is just a little bit of extra cruelty, but keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. The woman who previously worked as a nurse and psychotherapist weighed 13 stone when she moved in with Manson, but her weight plummeted to 8 stone when he forced her to work on the land. He basically kept her as a sabia, basically. If you go back and watch my video on The Last Girl, which is still in the members section on Patreon, on Locals, and on YouTube, you can watch the entire thing. You'll understand the treatment of the Sabias at the hand of ISIS. That's basically what she was kept as. And she met him at a workshop where Manson was running at Glastonbury in 2015 to get in touch with your inner voice. Playing on, again, I would say that it's one of the damaging fruits of feminism and what it's basically gotten women to fall into, right? Get in touch with your inner voice. So she was quite clearly taken in by a snake oil salesman that told her everything that she wanted to hear, right? And then obviously just was incomprehensibly evil, as we'll talk about in a moment. So skipping through, the victim's statement read to the court on Wednesday. Make sure you read this paragraph here, ladies and gentlemen. She felt stupid and was led down the garden path by Manson and now suffers PTSD and anxiety. The woman who said she walks with a stick due to the abuse added, I felt worthless and unlovable, or I feel worthless and unlovable. This is kind of things where you wish that they would have been able to work through their marital differences. If they were able to work through their marital differences and it wasn't such a push for divorce if you want to go and shag the postman or whatever, I'm not saying that's what happened in this instance, but feminism, whole demonization of marriage as a patriarchal institution, maybe if they'd stayed married, maybe if they'd been able to salvage things and exercise a bit of forgiveness for each other for whatever happened, maybe this wouldn't have happened. The court heard that Manson used weapons to assault his then partner, including a hot fire poker to burn her, hitting her to the head with a walking stick and bashing her leg with an axe-like tool called an adze. This is a really important point, ladies and gentlemen. Giving evidence at the trial, the woman then said the couple became followers of Sufi Islam, and her Islamic name was Khadija, and his was Ibrahim. Now, not only did he change his name, which is important to go over, and we'll go over what Sufi Islam actually means in a moment. I don't know whether it's because the author of this piece doesn't actually know what Sufi Islam means, because it makes you think that it's a different sect of Islam. It's not. It's more of a spiritual practice within Sunni and Shia Islam. It's integral kind of to both, and the difference between those is basically just the only difference between Shia, or the main difference between Shia and Sunni, the main schism between the two, is basically who was the successor of Muhammad. That's basically is how I understand it, but we'll go through all that in a moment. But interesting to see how Islam was tied into this as well. Manson forced her to stand outside to pray on a winter's night as part of the abuse and told her to wear a full-face veil to cover her bruises. He told me to take everything off and go outside and pray. I was shivering. It was dark. Eventually, he let me back in. My teeth were chattering. He told Manson to wear a veil before threatening, if anyone asks, it's between you and God, nothing to do with them. So again, further, more isolation, lie to people if they, ask what is going on or stuff like that. Says between you and God, kind of puts him, it kind of speaks to the way that he was thinking, kind of puts him in the frame of mind that he thinks he is God, right? Because this has nothing to do with God. The beatings that he would administer to her, nothing to do with between her and God, unless you're then classifying yourself as God, and that's where you see the main delusion coming in through this. The court heard that he ordered her to stay in the caravan on their land and pray for forgiveness after she refused sex. Manson told the police that he had strangled his former partner until she passed out more than 10 times during their 8-year relationship. That's more than once a year on average. On one occasion, the woman said her hand, this is particularly, disturbing, ladies and gentlemen. Again, another viewer discretion advised. Said her hands and feet were tied before her head was pushed into a plastic box filled with rainwater. I tried to fight him off. This was in a police interview, but he was just too strong for me. He just overpowered me. I got scared at the last minute. I thought he was going to drown me. And then he got scared at the last minute. Bring this article up. Bring this part of the video up next time you have either like a liberal friend or someone like that liberal beta male soy boy, which we had at the start, who said that women shouldn't have arms to defend themselves or that she could defend herself against a 200-pound man. Right? Just bring this up next time. He also dragged her from an outbuilding by her hair before he pressed the knife up quite hard to her throat and said that he would chop her up and feed her to the dogs. You're seeing here the absolute depravity that's in store. But what I want to know is that why, for so long, all the way up until this point, they'd used the name Anthony Manson when it appears his real name, or at least maybe another name, whatever, is Antonio Villafane. Or Antonio Villafane. Why is it for so long, I don't know, either this is his actual name and Manson is an alias, or Manson is his name and this is an alias? Why do they only find this important to mention about 12 or so, or 15 or so paragraphs in? But either way, he was found guilty of coercive or controlling behavior, unlawful wounding, actually bodily harm, and fraud. He was given 8 years and handed an indefinite restraining order. Somehow, I don't think that that is actually going to be very effective. Who's to say he won't be released early? Who's to say he won't be released early? It's potentially doubtful, given the charges that he was given. But again, unlawful wounding, actually bodily harm, they seem to have let people out early for worse, right? Or in many instances, not even put them in front of a courtroom for worse. But the biggest thing is, again, where I'm not sure whether the author of this doesn't understand what Sufi actually means, or Sufism actually is. So if you just do a basic search of Sufism, all it is what's been deemed as the mystical, spiritual dimension of Islam, focused on the inner experience, ethical practices, and cultivating a personal connection with God. I'm literally just reading this from Google search, by the way. So if you just type in Sufism or Sufi Islam into Google, this is what will come up. It originated around the 9th century. It was obviously a fair while after Islam itself came on the scene, right? After Islam itself was founded. Spread throughout the Muslim world, characterized by practices like meditation, poetry, and the veneration of the saints. It's not a separate sect, which is why I think that part of the article is going to be a little bit misleading if you don't know this. You think that it's a certain sect of Islam. No, it's a practice within Islam. It's a practice within both Sunni and Shia Islam. For those who don't know, again, if you just type this into Google, and by the way, he says here, one of the things that apparently focuses on with their practices are things like love, sincerity, and humility to empty the ego and achieve unity with the divine. So, fair to say, I don't think he was being a very good Sufi Muslim, right? But the only difference really, and this is why, again, particularly in Western world, we need to look at this as Islam as a collective problem, as a religious problem, and the political changes that come as a result of it, which their religion tells them to enforce. The main dispute then between Sunni and Shia, and why this sect can be, this practice within it can be done to both, because the core elements of Islam are the same. The only real difference between the two is who the Sunnis and the Shias deem should be the one to succeed Muhammad, and as a result then whom the additional teachings then come from. So, as an example, in Sunni Islam, they believe that the Prophet, again, it's just from Google, so again, take it with a grain of salt, or if you have any more information on this, clarify some things which I might not be explaining very well, leave them down below. They believe the Prophet Muhammad's successor should be chosen by the community, which in this instance then they supported the leadership of the first caliph, who was known as Abu Bakr, and then his successors. Shia Islam, on the other hand, believed that Ali was the rightful successor to Muhammad, either because he designated it or I believe that he was a relative. And this belief extends to Ali and all of the descendants as the rightful leaders, which in this instance then, they have different places where the main authority comes from, it seems. Both of them obviously revolving around the Quran, right? The holy text. But one of them coming from the Quran and Hadith and the sayings and traditions of the Prophet as interpreted by religious scholars, and they follow the Sunnah. And then the Shias invest their religious authority in the Prophet's household, Alul Bayt, so however you say it, and it's passed down through a line of imams who are believed to possess spiritual knowledge, special spiritual knowledge for interpreting the Quran. Think of this as almost like the great schism of Islam, if you will. Like you had the great schism within the Christ Church, right, within the Orthodox Church, and that's what formed the Roman Catholic Church, right? It broke away. You have that schism, which I believe, I'm not sure when this sort of separation occurred or whatever, but you had the great schism of the church, right? And you also had this great schism basically within Islam, which basically, again, it's a question over authorities. It's a question over authority, basically. Roman Catholic seeing the ultimate authority as the Pope, and then the Orthodox seemingly seeing it as the coalition of bishops, basically the patriarchs, right? And the bishops, you know, the Pope at one point would have just been called the Bishop of Rome, you know, and you had the bishops all over the world then. They would convene and they would, you know, have councils and so on. This is basically their schism. And in many instances, this is why, around the world, these people are fighting in amongst themselves. So when you see people that only blame Westerners for getting involved in foreign nations as a reason for things like asylum seekers and all of this stuff, understand that these people often fight themselves, fight amongst themselves. And they do so for differences in their religion. So we can't be blamed for all of them. And you see infighting, when you see rival groups of Muslims fighting in the Middle East, doesn't always have anything to do with us. Or in Asia and all these other places, doesn't always have anything to do with us. All right? Yeah, we all of a sudden seem to always get blamed for it. And in the final example today of quote-unquote Brits behaving really badly, I don't know, again, Antonio Villafane, one of where we could trace his heritage back to, if that's his actual name. This is a particular scumbag known as Sam Pepper. And I felt this was important to go through because this is just comically evil. Just goes to show, again, the influence and the influence and the effects of social media that can have on people as well, particularly with young, impressionable people, right? Sam Pepper, who in this instance now seems to be banned from every streaming platform that there is, right? He got removed from YouTube, I believe it was, although some of his videos are still up on there, it seems. He got banned from Kick and Pump.fun, that latter one I've never heard of, right? But if you get banned from Kick, you seem that to be like a particularly, particular level of like degenerate, basically, from what I've seen. He was in India recently. For Diwali. And whilst he was there, live streamed himself firing a rocket, toward a group of kids, right? That is where, again, we have to look at our own, and I would have no problem with the Indian government in this instance now applying for extradition and wanting to do whatever the hell they wanted to him. Maybe they could throw him into their little, flinging festival and have him, submerged under all of it and basically buried alive under all of it. I think that'd pretty much be, if you have a look at his history and stuff like that, would be quite an apt justice, should we say, because this one young girl in particular now, is going to have lifelong complications from this. He live streamed it and promptly fled India after it, fired a firework into a group of kids, and the one young girl, suffered such complications as a full thickness corneal laceration and uveal tissue prolapse, which is basically going to result in her having lifelong complications with regards to her vision for the rest of her life. Bring up some images on what these sort of things look like in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. But Here's the video itself. I'm not going to play it with any volume because hearing these, you know, disgusting people cheering this on, you have a certain amount of people, you know, natives that you might say, cheering this on and laughing at it seemingly, whether it's because, again, it's this wacky, zany Westerner that's come over and is, oh, look how countercultural, or look how, you know, whatever the hell he is, right? Just when you watch this video, ladies and gentlemen, understand that this young girl now has actually lost her vision. So there you go, fires it into the crowd. And you can't hear it, but there's huge cheering, laughing. He's openly celebrating it, right? He's openly celebrating it, raising his fist in the air. You can see all of these groups here laughing and seemingly to condone it, right? Absolutely horrendous. Just pause that there. This is the reaction to firing a firework into a group of children, which later then resulted in one of them, I believe that the eye is basically deteriorated fully. It's not going to ever be able to be salvaged, the vision in that eye. This is the face of that. But why I think it's important to talk about, obviously talking about, you know, the degeneracy of this. But this guy obviously has a long history of stuff like this. This guy has a long history of stuff like this. So when we're looking at viewer discretion advised if you're a bit squeamish, ladies and gentlemen, when we're talking about full thickness corneal laceration, we're talking really about, if I bring this up like this, we're talking really about things like this. So this is an image of, you just pipe into Google, full thickness corneal laceration. Images like this will come up. You can clearly see here, this is where the laceration appears to be. Right? Particular attention to this, ladies and gentlemen. This next one's pretty squeamish. Viewer discretion advised, obviously. But he tried to downplay this as the girl wasn't like faking it, essentially, but people were overblowing the actual damage that was done, and it wasn't actually what people were saying. This is now going to be coming up on screen, what was it, uveal tissue prolapse? Is that what it was called? I'll just double check, make sure I've got it right. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. Yeah, uveal tissue prolapse. This is what that looks like. Yeah. Not nice. Not nice whatsoever. Not nice whatsoever. That's what this piece of shit done to this young girl. The lifelong complications now she will face is complete or near blindness in the left eye, permanent monocular vision, no depth perception, significantly reduced peripheral vision on the left side, poor overall visual acuity for the rest of her life. It's going to obviously affect everyday tasks. High likelihood of phthisis bulbi, which is basically shrinking and scarring of the eyeball over a period of years. Or potentially even secondary enucleation later if the eye becomes painful, infected, or cosmetically unacceptable. The scarring and opacity means even if a corneal transplant is attempted later, success rates are low. With prolapse and contamination from the firework, multiple transplants are often needed, often with high rejection risk. Secondary glaucoma from angle damage or chronic inflammation. It's very common after uveal prolapse. May require lifelong pressure-lowering drops or surgeries. Risk of sympathetic ophthalmia, rare but devastating autoimmune reaction where the good right eye becomes inflamed and could go blind too. Requires long-term monitoring and sometimes immunosuppressive treatment. This is an area of the world, mind you, that very likely just the average girl, the average family is not going to be able to really afford any of this. Chronic pain, light sensitivity, dry eye, or recurrent erosions. Cosmetic and deformity. Obviously, so you could have opaque white scarring visible on the eye, and psychological and developmental impact because she's 8 years old. She's 8 years old, and he tried to claim, that the girl only had a minor cut. Apparently, he did pay for the hospital expenses, apologized, and apparently the matter has been settled. But she still, nonetheless, suffered the full-thickness corneal injury with uveal tissue prolapse. She lost her eye because this streamer wanted to have reckless fun. Quote-unquote reckless fun. But he has a long history of things like this and flirtations with the law. And you're seeing here now where, again, opportunities to really do something about this guy or things that he's done in the past really should have been heeded. Maybe we should have been a lot harsher on these things than we were. Not to mention he's put his quote-unquote friends through traumatization with some of his quote-unquote pranks. But this guy has a long history of, you know, these quote-unquote pranks, scamming, sexual assault and harassment allegations. And now, seemingly, because nothing was done about it before, whether he wasn't investigated enough, a young girl in India, seemingly very preventably, has lost her sight. In 2014, Sam Pepper came under sexual assault and sexual harassment sexual assault allegations, and a campaign against him for sexual harassment pranks. He began using a fake hand, what he called fake hand ass pinch prank is what he called it. He used a fake hand to pinch women's behinds in public without consent while asking for directions, right? Which, yes, would be sexual harassment. It would absolutely be sexual harassment. Obviously triggered immediate outrage. The hashtag report Sam Pepper trending on Twitter. Must use Twitter at the time. But apparently then it was all staged. He followed it up with a similar video targeting men. I don't really buy it. Many critics and viewers rejected his explanation as disingenuous. But in the wake of this, multiple allegations then came forward. Women came forward with direct allegations against him, including soliciting nude photos from an underage fan. These are allegations, by the way. I don't believe he's ever been convicted of any of these, so I'm not implying that he actually has done these. These are allegations that came forward. Inappropriate sexual contact, in at least one case dating back years. No criminal charges were filed from these. They investigated, i.e. Los Angeles police confirmed that they investigated Pepper in July 2014 for suspected a sexual offense against a woman, but dropped it when the alleged victim declined to cooperate. So again, maybe it was actually a fake instance, right? There's a good chance maybe he didn't do it. I don't know. There's other explanations as well. You've seen, you know, witnesses or... Oops, sorry guys. You've seen witnesses or accusers, you know, get, I don't know, silenced or threatened and stuff like that. There's no reports of anything like that happening. But you can keep an open mind with regards to this stuff. It might be that they knew it was a false allegation and it wasn't going to go anywhere. Maybe it was so long ago that, you know, the DNA evidence or whatever wouldn't be around, obviously, so that there's no point in trying to pursue it anymore. Maybe the person doesn't trust law enforcement. Who knows? Who knows? But again, it could be spurious. Could have been something to it. We don't know. YouTuber Lacey Green revealed expose videos in an open letter demanding he stop violating women. And he eventually deleted the videos. But then in 2015, he ramped it up another notch with what has gone down in infamy. Right? I think he got a lot of flack for this. And in many, I think it's got him to be removed from YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. He done a prank. He is a plank, but he done a prank where he quote-unquote killed his best friend, or his best friend was killed. Pepper uploaded in November 2015 a prank called Killing Best Friend Prank with Sam Goldbach and Colby Brock. The video, which was staged, but obviously one of them didn't know, Goldbach didn't know, so it's Colby in this instance. Pepper, masked, walked up behind him, and in fact, I'll show you a couple of stills from this video. It's still on YouTube. I won't actually play it, but basically, this part of the video which you see here is Colby, and I'm just going to recrop it a little bit so that it's a bit more centered. This is Colby and what was the other guy's name? What was the other guy's name? Colby and Sam. Colby's on the left. So in this example here, to bring it up for you, Colby's on the left and Sam's on the right. Now, not long after this, Sam, shown here with the mask on, walks up behind Colby, puts the hood over his head and drags him down to the ground. Sam pretends to get kidnapped. They tie him up, and you can see them doing that here. Another guy comes in to help out. So you can see Sam has dragged him to the ground. And here, as I just recrop this a little bit to show you, on the left-hand side of this video is where Sam Pepper and the other guy that I believe pretend to be kidnapped come here to hold him in place so that they duct taped his arms and legs together, put him in the back of the car, staged this kidnapping, and then made it seem as though, and it's not quite enough for me to show this in the big frame, so I'll show it like this, may seem as though these kidnappers had killed his friend. So you go and find the video if you want. It's still up on YouTube, so you can go and find it. I don't want to play it in case it ends up getting pulled or whatever. Which is obviously a sadistically evil thing to do. A sadistically evil thing to do. I think Colby actually had some serious problems. I think Colby did indeed have some serious problems after this, as you would. In this instance, you did actually think that your friend had just been murdered in front of you. Now, admittedly, obviously, the prop gun wasn't great. When the prop gun fires, it's a bit like like not even a cap gun, right? But again, when you're in a catatonic panic, things like that seem so amplified. They're gonna seem real, right? You have no reason to believe this is not real. He had a complete disregard for his friend and how he would, manage this, and actually thinking that his friend had been murdered. And then obviously paraded his tears and everything like that on the internet for clicks and everything like that. Going over this is just so depressing. This is the kind of stuff. Remember, like all the others that were. There was that guy who was at J Station who faked his girlfriend's death in order to pretend that he was on a Ouija board with her. And I think he was actually like really abusive behind the scenes and stuff like that as well. It was awful. Awful. Apparently in 2016, he put up a video titled "I Give Up" on a temporary retreat. He made all his videos private, deleted most of his tweets, leaving only "I Give Up," and put a 20-minute apology video titled "I'm Sorry." But in 2021, leopards really never changing their spots. He worked as a paid consultant for FaZe Clan on their Save the Kids cryptocurrency, marketed as a charity token. Yes, you know exactly where this is going, ladies and gentlemen. You know exactly where this is going. It was a pump and dump scheme. Members dumped tokens immediately after launch, crashing the value and wiping out the investors. FaZe K, an investigator CoffeeZilla, accused Pepper of being the mastermind who altered the smart contract to enable the scam, planning to make $1 million and disappear. Pepper denied deep involvement, saying he was only hired for YouTube strategy advice by one FaZe member and got thrown under the bus. He blocked users calling him Scam Pepper on Twitter and was dropped by FaZe. In 2023, we have this Australia sex worker prank and arrest. He was streaming in Queensland with Ice Poseidon and Pepper, and collaborators paid an escort $500 to come to their hotel for what they presented as a prank on another streamer. They recorded her without full informed consent. She agreed to extra payment for filming, but tried to leave after realizing the setup and was briefly prevented or chased. Queensland police arrested Pepper and Ice Poseidon for suspected sexual assault, but released them without charges. And these effectively ended his mainstream YouTube career, leading to his videos being repeatedly removed and earned him permanent distrust from large parts of the online community. He later pivoted to TikTok, Kick IRL streaming, all of this stuff, and occasional crypto-related activities before the 2025 India firework incident got him banned from Kick and Pump.fun. I want you to leave in the comments, ladies and gentlemen, what you think the apt punishment would be for an absolute scumbag like this. Do you think he should be extradited to India? We should send him over to India and let them do whatever the hell they want? I wouldn't be objected to that. I wouldn't object to that. This is people like this bring shame, and this where it is okay to exercise a bit of social stigma for things that you do that are shameful, right? I know we said that you can't shame anything nowadays, right? You can't, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Make people feel any kind of shame for certain proclivities or anything like that. But makes you think that maybe a certain amount of shame for certain things might go a long way. Might go a long way to curbing a lot of the degeneracy that we see, particularly in our world today. Maybe if we, you know, stigmatize the idea of pumping kids full of chemical drugs. Maybe if we stigmatize other things. That's just one example. Let's see if we get our civilization back on track and not have disgusting degenerates like Sam Pepper costing young 8-year-old girls their vision and bringing shame upon all of us. Disgusting degenerate that he is. What would you do? Now that you know a lot about his history, right, of these quote-unquote pranks, what do you think the apt punishment is? What do you think the apt punishment is? Leave it down below. I know the community can be quite inventive when it comes to these things. Community can often be quite inventive, you know, creative, should we say? So let me know. Let me know what you think. I think it'd be good to force him to go out to the Hindi dung flinging festival and basically make him a little sarcophagus out of it. You know what I mean? I think that'd be pretty cool. And you've seen those videos of the Indians online, right? And they're making like a pool in the backyard. You know, the videos you get at like 4 a.m. in the morning when you're just scrolling on YouTube and you're seeing you're seeing these people just making a swimming pool in their backyard with like handheld tools in a couple of hours. They can clearly do it. Be pretty cool and a fitting end. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, something which I think is quite concerning. Now, we've been going for over 2 hours now, so we're going to start wrapping it up with this final story. This is something that's been making the rounds recently. Yeah, kind of shocked by this one a little bit, but also not. It's quite interesting that Dylan Dannis, in this instance, and I'm going to refer to him the same way that Michael Bisping refers to him a lot of the time, Dildo Dannis, right? Dildo Dannis, you know, usually gets that name because he often makes dildo out of himself. Saw that in the Logan Paul fight, the Logan Paul boxing match, where he essentially just led on his back in missionary, right? I know it's open guard in jiu-jitsu, but essentially led on his back in missionary, didn't fight. Or was it Jake Paul? I think it might have been Jake Paul. It was one of them anyway. You had him seemingly being a little bit of the Joker at one of UFC's events. And Dildo Dannis is a guy, he runs his mouth a lot. He runs his mouth a lot, and that's why people enjoy a lot of the time seeing him get his mouth shut up. But in this instance, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. Dana White said that Dildo Dannis has been banned from ever attending any UFC event ever again. Now, apparently what happened, I'll play the clip in a moment. Dildo Dannis was being Dildo Dannis and going around, you know, causing a little bit of hubbub, should we say, sitting in seats that he wasn't meant to, just being a joker, being a little bit of a dickhead, but not really seemingly harming anyone. However, the bit that caused Dildo Dannis to be banned, right, from the UFC events, according to Dana White, was that the Muslim Brotherhood was there in pretty much the first entire 5 rows for Islam. Now, I don't know if Dildo has said anything about Islam, right, like I do or whatever. But after a brawl broke out, in which, in fairness, Dildo Dannis didn't actually seem to instigate, and a bunch of Muslims piled onto him to attack him in the pack like they do, right? It was deemed that it was his fault. And many people have taken this to see that Dana White is being quite weak on this Islam issue. Many people asking, why the hell was the Muslim Brotherhood there in the first place? Many chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood have been designated a terrorist organization, by the way. Some, not all of it, not all of the organization, but many of the chapters have been designated terrorist organization. The entire organization, I believe, is designated as a terrorist organization in many countries in the Middle East, like the UAE. Seems that Dildo Dannis, in this instance, got attacked, and now he's the one being blamed for it, which is rather puzzling, to say the least. Here's the clip of Dana White at the press conference afterwards.
Can you just tell us how disappointed you were to see that and any insight into the fallout?
I blame myself for that, actually. They came back and told me right before I walked out for the main card that Dylan Dannis was here and he was moving around sitting in fighter seats and not sitting in his own seat that he had. He had a ticket. And they said, do you want us to throw him out of here? And I said, he has a ticket? And I said, yeah. And, you know, they told me, they said, Masvidal said he's going to f him up on site. And I said, well, where's Masvidal sitting? He said, well, he's 6 or 7 rows away from Masvidal. I said, well, if the guy has a ticket, let him sit in his seat and let him do what he's doing and keep an eye on him. It never even crossed my mind, as stupid as this could be, that the entire Muslim Brotherhood was here tonight in the first 5 rows for Islam. And as soon as it broke out, I was over on the other side and I go, I know exactly what that is. I knew it. And, yeah, you will never see Dylan Dannis at a UFC fight ever again.
Yeah.
So that's the clip. I find it quite puzzling because when you look at the actual clip, there's an extended version of this that was on my feed, but I can't find it now. Many of them in the comments, again, saying that, you know, what about the Muslim Brotherhood? Good question. Right. Amy Mack posted an article in the comments saying, why is America admitting a Dagestani Islamic enforcer, Khabib Nurmagomedov, who promised retaliation against anyone who insults Islam? Right. In America, they have this thing called the First Amendment, and that's protected. And it means that if outside of the realms of like credible threats or harassment or anything like that, or libel, defamation, all of these things, you can say whatever you want. That's an American citizen's inalienable right in the eyes of the US and their Constitution, right? And in this instance, it seemed that for no good reason, and there's many instances you can think of good reasons to attack Dylan Dannis, right? Dildo Dannis, right? He's a joker, you know. He's you know, a person that gets on a lot of people's nerves, right? But does that give what in many instances is a bunch of foreigners, a lot of them will be foreigners, right? Does it give them the reason and the justification to attack an American citizen when he seemingly wasn't doing anything? In a massive pack, like a bunch of, you know, animals, right? This is the video in question. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the videos. I'll play it on mute, but you can see that this is part of the exchange where a bunch of these violent Muslims jumped on Dylan Dannis and are attacking him, punching him in the back of the head. You can see him there. They're trying to get at him, all of them at the same time. And you can see this guy in the beige here punches him in the back of the head. Right? There's another guy in the white just behind him. This is one section of it. And before this, as far as I understand, in fact, I'll try and find I'll try and find the slightly longer version. So that's just in the comments of the post, which will be linked down below, by the way. I'm trying to find the actual post that I found. It was in the comment section of Tommy Robinson's take on this interview, on this post press conference. That's the word I was looking for. This is the slightly longer video. So you can see here that Dylan is somewhere in this, and he was just standing there. If I rewind it, he's just standing somewhere around here. Yeah. And there's a bunch of them that come in and try to attack him. So you see, this is the section of the video we saw. There you go. He just got punched in the back of the head. And they are relentless. There you go. There's another one there, look. Again, no honor, attacking him on the ground. That is an American citizen seemingly being attacked by a bunch of violent, vengeful foreigners for doing nothing. At least nothing that would warrant that kind of attack. Okay? If he was being a dick sitting in people's seats, right? He was told to move on. He was told to sit in his seat. Maybe if he doesn't then sit in his seat, you remove him from the venue. Right? Did he deserve to get piled on by a bunch of Muslims? No. At least in my opinion. And did he deserve to be banned from all future events because he got attacked? No. I don't think so. Anyway, but then again, I'm not running the UFC. I see this as a kind of weird way similarity to how our government have handled these issues, where they are scared to say anything about this, either because the UFC wants to expand into that kind of market across the world, right? You know, expand into maybe areas like Saudi Arabia, like WWE have done, right? And all these other areas, and they can't have people talking shit about Islam and all of this stuff. Think of when there was a bunch of comedians that went out to Saudi Arabia a little while ago, and Steven Crowder was talking about it, and they were told what they could say and what they couldn't say. They couldn't make any jokes about religion. They tried to say you couldn't make any jokes about religion whatsoever, because if they said that you can't make any jokes about Islam, that would have been a little bit of a, they wouldn't have been able to keep the veneer of what was going on intact. But then a lot of those comedians were going out and saying that you have more free speech out of Saudi Arabia, making jokes that about the US and the lack of quote-unquote free speech in the US, the lack of freedoms in the US on foreign soil, when they'd literally been told by the Saudi royals or by the Saudi government what they could and could not say, what they could and could not make jokes about. Tells you a lot about how hypocritical some people are. It's a little bit hypocritical, in my opinion, that Dana White is not going to say anything about the Muslim Brotherhood, right, and Islam, that, yes, is a direct threat to Western civilization, one of many, and is blaming Dylan Dannis, when Dylan Dannis didn't seem to do anything that warranted this kind of response. This is the nature of the followers of Islam. You have those that are overt about it and will attack you and will do all of this stuff. Then you'll have the ones who try to cover for it and say, oh, they're not real Muslims and all of this stuff, but it all ties into the same. They want all the same outcome. They want to expand the caliphate. They want to do all this stuff. That's why it should never be allowed in Western civilizations whatsoever. But to give a little bit of an insight, again, the Muslim Brotherhood is not prescribed in the US as a whole. It's not on the official list of prescribed terrorist organizations under the Terrorism Act of 2000, but it really should be. It really should be. In the United States, however, it does actually designate specific chapters of the organization, where President Trump on the 24th of November 2025 issued an executive order directing the designation of certain specific chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood, particularly those in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon, as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists due to their alleged support for violence, links to Hamas and Hezbollah, and threats to U.S. interests. Here you have Dana White here. Dana White seemingly taking the side of these people. And again, makes you wonder why. Why is it that in this instance, Dildo Dannis has to now never be allowed to attend a UFC event again? And if they decided he's not allowed to attend a UFC event again because wherever he goes, he always causes trouble, no matter who it is, no matter who it is, right? When he's sitting in fighters' seats, doesn't matter. He's not doing it with any particular racial or religious ideology in mind, whatever. He's doing it to be a dick. He's doing it to get on people's nerves, to be a jester, to provoke people. If you want to ban him for that, carry on. It's especially bad luck when you ban somebody, when you ban an American citizen for getting the shit beaten out of him, right? By a bunch of foreigners, more often than not, who have violent intentions towards your home country. That is particularly bad luck. That's what I think, anyway. I think this is... I don't really see there's much other way that Dana White can go about it. We've seen that Salman Rushdie, for example, after having a fatwa issued on his head and all of this stuff, has said that, he would still vote Labour and all of these things. So what else can you do? People are very afraid. People are very afraid. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dana White in the back of his head is extremely afraid. And that's why he's chosen to do this. But where's cowardice got us? Where's cowardice got us? Now, it's easy for me to say, obviously. I'm not the head of a multi-million or multi-hundred million, however much it is. I'll just quickly see if I can find out. Oh, well, I'm not the head of a $15 billion corporation, right? In terms of net worth, $15 billion corporation for the UFC. Stakes are very, very high. But I suppose at that point you do have a lot of resources to protect yourself and all of those things as well. So it's kind of catch-22. But I don't know. Weakness has never been a virtue. I know that. I can't help but that in this instance comes across as weakness. And that then people are only going to feel more emboldened. And the people like, for example, Khabib Nurmagomedov say anyone who insults Islam is going to suffer retaliation on distinctly non-Islamic soil and against non-Islamic people who reserve the right to say whatever they want. If you're offended by it, go cry in a corner. That weakness is only going to embolden more people that think that. Then having less means to defend yourself is only going to be emboldening these people more and more and more, and putting yourself at more and more of danger. I know if Khabib Nurmagomedov was going to turn up at my door, I wouldn't stand a chance. I know that. Unless I was armed, obviously. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But definitely not a good look. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching, listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. It's Friday, so I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible about tomorrow with some times and everything like that, where we can go over the Steve Lowe's conversation. I just need to make sure everything's going to work. And yeah, we'll go over all of that tomorrow. But thank you very much for watching, listening, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Leave your comments down below. Obviously, leave your comments down below. And yeah, looking forward to catching up with you again very, very soon. You take care, guys. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. I'll see you next time. And you take care now. Godspeed.